Hello, everyone. Coming to you again with CAPS Christian Counseling, Project Paladin, and our new podcast, Dancing with the Darkness. We are doing, once again, a raw, unfiltered look at life with CPTSD and the effects of cumulative trauma, whatever those might be, from a very personal and intimate experience of myself. This is Dr. Joseph Capps coming to you again. And today we want to talk about some things that many of us may not have recognized that have followed us into our adult life. And we actually, as children, believe it or not, if you remember back, and I don't want you to go back in your memories and for it to be a painful experience today, I want you to look back at some self-comforting measures that you may have done and you may still do as an adult. I, at 50 years old, still find myself sometimes unconsciously doing some of these self-comforting or self-nurturing actions. And for those that don't know me, it may just look like a quirk, or it may just look like something that's odd. Anybody that knows me intimately, which is actually very few, they realize that these are some things that have followed me from childhood, that when I am in distress or I am having a hard time that's a little bit more than just the normal stress, such as maybe some emotional flashbacks. A lot of times we like to use the word triggers. Honestly, that word kind of connotates a lot of different things. And so for the purposes of this podcast, I'd like to either call them a painful memory, or we can call them a remembrance, or we can call them a repressed memory. We can call them a lot of different things. But just for the purpose of this podcast, Dancing with the Darkness, I want to refer to them as other things as opposed to the word trigger that get used so often. And there's a lot of reasons why, but the main reason why is that this really isn't an accurate account, because when we think of the word trigger, we're actually thinking about what's called an amygdala-based in the brain reaction. And so we're literally talking about the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn reaction that we have, that's an immediate amygdala-based, threat-based reaction. And a lot of times these things are not just based in the amygdala, they are based in the whole part of the brain. The whole, that we have two hemispheres that are split into two more lower and upper hemispheres, and the entire brain literally a lot of times is engaging when we have these painful emotional flashbacks and we have these different things. And so the proof is, a lot of times these self-comforting measures are still part of our life, and we may not even realize it. These are our instinctual go-tos to nurture ourselves or to comfort ourselves. And so the reason I want to talk about these today is because sometimes we may not be having a visceral reaction to the repressed memory, or something that caused an emotional flashback, or something that has caused something that's repressed to maybe show its ugly face. With CPTSD, it is cumulative, it is developmental, and so there's so many layers that are involved. There's so much that gets repressed. As a child, one of our resilience factors, and one of the reasons why we are able to bounce back, is the fact that we were able as children to repress and compartmentalize and to shove these things back and to just get rid of them. And that's because we have a lot of room in the brain at that time. We're developing, cells are growing, neurons are growing. It brings us all into that whole subject of epigenesis and the genetic component and all of these things. We could go on a rabbit trail all day long, but it all ties together. And so we need to understand that the older we get, and especially if we are still in a toxic environment, or if we are still, in the paladin fields where we are having a tremendous amount of stress, whether it even be eustress or distress, our brain and our body will reach a capacity, and stuff is going to start coming out. And it may not be the recent trauma that you just experienced. It may be something that happened 20, 30, or even 40 years ago. And so we have got to be conscious of this, because part of our grounding techniques that we're trying to teach you on this podcast is that we have got to be able to stop for a second, do some breathing, and realize that the threat does not exist. Whatever this existential threat was that caused us a long-lasting traumatic reaction, body, mind, and soul, we have to remind ourselves immediately that that threat does not exist. It is not present, and we are not in that immediate danger. Okay? I'm not talking about the paladin fields where you may be in immediate danger, but that is a present threat that's in your face, that's tangible. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when we are in a stressful or toxic environment, and it's not necessarily what's happening to us now that is causing this exponential threat and this tremendous reaction. It is actually things that were repressed that are coming up and resurfacing, and all of that cumulatively can have one heck of a reaction. And so today I want to talk about the other side of this, and I want you to understand your self-comforting behaviors that you may still be employing, okay? And we're not going to talk about these things in a negative way, okay? Because this is what got you through as a child. This is what got you through when you were innocent and you had no one to protect you, or you had nowhere to go. You had to employ some mechanisms that gave you comfort, okay? And so I'm going to share what mine are today, and they may be similar, they may be different, okay? But these are things that at 50 years old, I still see unconsciously sometimes. I don't realize that I'm doing them. And so the reason I want to bring this up is because if you are not having a negative reaction right now to something, if something repressed has resurfaced and you're not having an emotional flashback, that does not mean that you're not having a reaction. And what I mean by that is if you pay attention to yourself and you start to see yourself employing some of these self-nurturing or comforting measures, then that is a sign that you are having a reaction to something, okay? And so I'm going to call this a passive reaction versus an active reaction. And the reason why this is so important for people with CPTSD is that if we can catch these things that are passive, we can actually start working through them before it becomes active and it becomes an area of tremendous stress or re-traumatization or crisis, okay? That's why I want to talk about this, okay? And so I tend to talk about things that are ever present in my own life because I want this podcast to be 100% genuine. I want this podcast to be legitimate, completely truthful. And so I'm not going to read something to you out of a book. I'm not going to talk about theory. I'm not going to talk about what we've learned in science or medicine about this condition. I'm going to tell you how it affects me and what I realize in my own life, and how you can apply that to yours and hopefully receive some healing or at least some de-escalation of your symptoms. That's the only reason we're here. The only reason we're doing this podcast is that I intend, until God takes me on to heaven, to continue on sharing my experiences and my pain and my suffering in an effort to help anyone out there that is listening to this podcast. It doesn't matter who you are. If I can help one person today with this podcast, it is an absolute miracle, and it is all that I desire in my heart. And so I want to talk about just some things in my own life that have manifested this week, okay? We do this weekly, and if you're living with CPTSD like I am, you realize that a week can be an eternity for you. A week may not seem like long for most people, but when you have had years and years and years and years of cumulative trauma, and you have decided to step out into your healing journey, which means that you're going to pick scabs, you're going to have to process some things, you're going to have to make some conscious choices that you are powerless and that you need to submit to either a higher power or you need to get into therapy, whatever it is, these things are going to manifest because part of the healing process, part of the healing brain, is it wants to purge, okay? And it's no different from our immune system. When there's a virus or an infection or whatever it is, our immune system, produces antigens and white blood cells. And it's quite a fascinating area of biology when we see virology and all of these things and what our body is engineered to do to fight this war. Well, guess what? Stress and trauma and all of these things, our body and our brain know that they don't belong. And so they fight. And unfortunately, it's an unseen enemy, and so we end up fighting ourselves. And that's what this horrible reaction is. It's inflammation, it's sickness, it's your stomach feeling bad. It's all of the effects of stress, like the headache in the back of your neck, maybe the migraine in the front of your head. Our body is literally trying to fight a war with an unseen enemy, and we're actually hurting ourselves. And so you need to understand that we literally are in a battle, and you also need to understand that when you start getting gray like I am, this white beard I have, okay, we are the same way that we are less able to recover physically when we have an injury. We are also less able to recover when we have tremendous amounts of stress, and that's because it takes a toll on our body. It takes a toll on our endocrine system. It takes a tremendous toll on our nervous system, our organs, everything. Okay, and so this is normal. This is normal. We're going to react in a certain way, and it's going to be difficult. Okay, so today I want to talk about some self-comforting measures that you may still do from childhood, and then also I want to talk about some things that you can do when that happens, so that we can mitigate or lessen the reaction to a big stressor, because none of us like that gut-wrenching. It feels like your organs are just falling out of your body. You just literally stop for a second, and it's just a very visceral, powerful reaction, and it's absolutely just horrific. The older you get, it's harder and harder to recover from these things. We literally get on that adrenaline high and get that adrenaline fatigue, and then it's like you just want to crash and burn. And this is very, very dangerous because it's a mixture of highs and lows. And so that's why we see so many misdiagnoses with CPTSD, because it's easy for a psychiatrist or whoever, if you're telling them these things, they're like, oh, well, he's cycling, he's got bipolar, or he's got borderline personality disorder, or, that's why we're doing this podcast. You need to understand what's going on with you, why it's happening, and what can we do to give you some relief. So some of the self-comforting behaviors, okay, they go all the way back to early childhood for me. So one of the things I remember 100% was having a rocking chair that was literally, it was a bear. And I talk about this in one of my early podcasts about my childhood, but this was a bear. It was red and white, kind of like in the pattern of a panda bear. And it was a rocking chair. And when I would come home from school and I did not know what I would have tremendous anxiety to the point where I was literally almost peeing my pants walking home from the bus early on, kindergarten probably. And so I was terrified for a lot of reasons. Once a week, I had to get allergy shots that, my mother was a nurse, and they tried to give me allergy shots at the doctor's office, and all the king's horses and all the king's men were not going to be able to hold this kid down. I was berserk because these things hurt like hell. But what we do with our caregivers, right, even if they abuse us, even if they treat us like total garbage, we inherently trust them. Okay? And so I trusted my mother enough to literally stick my arms out and to let her give me these very painful allergy shots that I'm talking back in the 70s. These things were horrific, okay? I don't know what they're like now, but back then, not only did it hurt like hell when she gave them to me, but I had a reaction. I would swell up like golf ball size welts. So it was painful for hours, okay? And so, this was like a Tuesday or a Wednesday that she would do this. And I'll tell you that what made it even worse was she was an alcoholic. And so I did not know every day what I was coming home to anyway. Was she drunk already? Was she getting drunk? Was she sober? I never knew what I was coming home to. And it was very, very scary for a young child, okay? And so this does a lot of things to us physiologically. It wires us for anxiety. It wires us for fear. And so we literally go into life with that fear and that anxiety and that distrust, okay? And that fear of abandonment. All of those things follow us. And so we develop some self-nurture and some self-comforting measures to get us through this, okay? So I walk home and who knows what I'm going to get, okay? And then another complication here was that it's not like I could schedule it because it might be a Tuesday or it might be a Wednesday that I get these shots. You know why? Because it all depends on how much vodka Mama is drinking, okay? When did she get off of work and how drunk is she, okay? So I would come into the door and there was a kitchen counter there and I would look. If all the stuff was laid out where she was making my shots, I knew it was coming. And if not, then there's a little bit of relief, but at the same time, the anxiety starts all over again because now I know I've got to go through 24 hours of fear and anxiety and desperation because these shots are coming tomorrow, okay? And so I want you to understand this cycle first. And now I want you to understand some of the things that I had to do as a child that I wasn't even conscious of until I was an adult, okay? But I would sit in that little rocking chair and I would rock, okay? And I would rock and I would rock and I would rock, okay? And so that's what got me through the anxiety in order to be able to go into the kitchen and get those shots. Or when she was drunk and she was screaming or she was trying to hurt me or whatever it was, the rocking chair would be a place of solace for me. Even if I would go stick it in a corner and face the wall and rock, it gave me comfort. Now, this same measure would be how I got myself to sleep at night. The first thing that I would do is I would cover all the way up in my blankets. All you could do is peek out because I'm a child that has tremendous fear of everything, okay? And it's not just the boogeyman that I'm afraid of. It's not the monsters under the bed, okay? It's what is my mother going to do, okay? And then later on, when I went to live with my father, same thing. What is my father going to do, okay? And so this is tremendously taxing for a child, okay? And it does follow you into adulthood. And so I would rock myself to sleep. And I would do this other thing that I have affectionately called the cricket now, where I would rub my legs together like a cricket. But there was some sort of rocking or fidgeting or something that would help me go to sleep. Very much like when you're an infant and your parent would rock you or whatever, okay? I don't remember those things. I don't have positive memories of that kind of nurturing or that kind of care. But I do know that it is needed, and it's obviously needed because I developed those things for myself in order to make it through life. And I remember when I first got married in my 20s, and you know, the person I married would comment on that. She would call me, you know, she'd say that I sleep like Mother Mary, you know, that I look like Mother Mary with my blankets on, and I would continue to rock myself even with someone else in the bed with me. I still was self-comforting, okay? And so this has gotten better, obviously, over the years, but at the same time, there are frequent times where I see these self-comforting behaviors come into play. And so here I am at this age and double doctorate and a clinical traumatologist, and I have all these skills and I have all of these things. Well, guess what? That doesn't matter. Because these things are still there, they're still visceral, they're still real, and they still manifest themselves, okay? And so I'm going to tell you some things that have happened this week and why these measures have come up, and then I want to tell you why it's important that we recognize these things, okay? So one of the things that has happened this week is, you know, my father had a spill. My father is still living. He's almost 80 years old. He had a spill. He went to the hospital. The last video I did, that was in effect, and it absolutely had something to do with what I talked about in the last video. And so I want to talk about how this has progressed and what it does to us psychologically. So I have gone from being the oppressed person to now all of a sudden I am the accountable and responsible person. I am literally accountable and responsible for this man that did some pretty bad things to me. Okay, and one of the greatest things was it affected and still affects my self-esteem and my worth in the amount of shame and guilt that I feel. Okay, so these are long-lasting, deep psychological wounds. But in my moral and ethical soul and the godly man that I'm trying to be, I moved him up here from the South where he was alone, and I just felt like I needed to do the right thing and look out for him the best that I could. And so I made that commitment, and it has been a journey, but it has been, not so bad until this episode. Okay, and so now he's in a rehab facility, and we don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be, can he come back home? Can he, is he going to go into assisted living? We don't know. It all depends on how he recovers. So long story short, I want to tell you how this manifests itself with me is that he has all of these things that he's anxious about, and he still has cognitive ability, and so he's anxious about his bills and this and this and this. Well, all of a sudden, guess what? That's my burden now. It's my burden to go to his house, find all of his papers, figure out all of his bills, okay? And it's important for you to understand how this works, okay? When I was a teenager, I would come home and there would be expectations. My dad worked graveyard shift and he was asleep, but he would have a list of chores on the counter, and I was to complete those chores or there was going to be hell to pay, okay? And so the same way I walked home with anxiety as a child, waiting for my allergy shots or whatever hell that was going to be unleashed, I would walk home every single day with tremendous anxiety again. As a matter of fact, I can feel some anxiety in me right now as I talk about this, okay? And I'm mentioning that because I want you to know that I'm conscious of it, and so I want you to learn to be conscious of it, okay? To be conscious of what your feelings are. And so I would have that same anxiety because I did not know what was going to be on that paper. Was it going to be something that was going to take me an hour, or was it going to be an impossible task like, cut all the grass or rake all the leaves, okay? Now, that may not sound like a big deal to you, but when you have an acre and a half and you're push mowing that or you're raking that with a rake by yourself, that's a hell of a lot of work, okay? If you look at what people charge to do that, landscapers now, you go ahead and price that. Go ask a landscape company what they're going to make you pay to cut an acre and a half or to do all of the raking of the leaves on an acre and a half. You're going to spend some money, okay? So I worked my butt off. Now, did my father teach me work ethic? Absolutely. Did he teach me responsibility and accountability? Absolutely. So I am not going to say that there was not some tremendous benefit to what my father was doing. He did a lot of things right. But there was also an oppressiveness. There was also never being good enough, never doing enough, never reaching whatever bar was set. And so you go into life as an overachiever and you set a bar for yourself that you can't reach, okay? And this causes more anxiety, more fear, more sense of failure. And so we need to realize the pattern, and we need to realize what happens. You just continue to set a bar for yourself that you can never reach, and this is not healthy, okay? And so those same areas that I'm telling you that I had the anxiety and the stress, they became present this week because of him being in rehab and then his expectations, okay? And he's not doing that to be mean or to be cruel. He has his own sense of panic. He has his own sense of anxiety because you go from being mobile to not being ambulatory like that to where he has to have a wheelchair or a walker. And so I'm trying to objectively look at his fear, okay? The fear and anxiety he's having to be independent, and now he's not. And now I have to rely on other people, okay? And so my go-to, if I'm him, is I'm going to go to my son, who has always been the one that has done everything, right? I've always been the path of least resistance, and I've always been the one that, takes the punch on the chin or sucks it up, whatever it is. Okay, so here we go again, and it's not, hey, can you please do this for me? It's demanding. It's like harassing, like on the phone, like blowing my phone up. Did you go to the post office and get this form so the mail can be on my porch? You got to pay my cable bill. You got to pay my power bill, blah, blah, blah. And I understand he's in a sense of panic. But we need to realize as adults that have grown up in that environment that has followed us into adulthood, we need to realize how it affects us now. Okay, and so I had to realize that this was causing me a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety on top of all of the anxiety and stress I already have in life with working and being bivocational and taking care of a family. And so this is another rock that we're putting in my backpack that I'm supposed to carry. Okay, and so as I was controlling that anxiety and doing my breathing and doing my grounding and trying to stay calm and trying to stay objective and trying to compartmentalize all of this, I did not catch the fact that all of my self-comforting behaviors were coming back, okay? And the reason this is important is because we understand the magnitude of what's going on. And so for my subconscious, for my parasympathetic nervous system really, to kick in and to employ these measures where I find myself rocking in a chair, where I feel myself fidgeting, or at night I have not only been like rocking myself to sleep, but my spouse tells me I sleep like Dracula. I'm literally like this, and I'm holding myself. I'm self-nurturing and comforting myself. Okay, and it's completely subconscious. I'm not even conscious of it. And so I got to thinking about that at the end of this week, and I'm like, I really want to do a video and do a podcast about this because people are probably like me out there and they don't realize that they're still using these behaviors. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these behaviors at all. If these are things that help your parasympathetic nervous system calm you down, and these are things that help you get through the situations, you know what? You're not hurting anyone, are you? You're not hurting anyone around you. These are things that are helping you cope, and there's nothing wrong with that. The point of this video has been that I want you to be more conscious of these things, because when your body and your brain are employing these self-comforting measures, it is a strong indicator that you are in a very stressful or toxic situation. Okay, and so I want us to be able to recognize that. I want us to be able to take a step back and say, okay, this is really taking a toll on me. This is really affecting me, and why is it affecting me? And then we have the ability to process a little bit, and we realize that it's not the situation that we're in right now, but it's a cumulative stressor that's taking us back. It's making us remember things that caused us anxiety. Okay, so I'm feeling the anxiety at 4 and 5 years old, and I'm feeling the anxiety of being a young man between the ages of 10 and 17 as I'm coming home to these chores. And once again, now I'm feeling it now because I feel like I have these expectations that I have to meet, that it's my problem, that it's my responsibility to calm my father and calm his nervous system and fix him. And you know what? It's not, okay? I have the responsibility as a good son to do what God says and to care for my parent the best I can and to love him, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do what I'm capable of doing. And I have to recognize that there's things that I have no control over, and I have to be able to breathe and take a step back and realize that I can't do it on my own. Okay, and these are hard things to do when you grow up in that environment and you've been on your own and you've been independent and you feel like you can't trust anybody and you feel like you got to do everything on your own. It's difficult. I want you to understand that I totally get this, and I understand it because I live it. And so, like I said, this is a raw, real account. I'm not talking to you about things that are not true. Even if they're not true for you, they're true for me, and so that's truth. And so I want you to understand that when we have these self-comforting behaviors, even if we're not having a full-blown stress reaction, we absolutely have to recognize that these things are happening, and it's a very good idea to take a step back to try to figure out what's causing the distress, to process a little bit and realize if it's the current stressor or if it's something from the past that's getting to you, okay? And now we have the ability to employ some coping strategies, okay? And so I want to end this video by giving you some very passive coping strategies that could very well prevent you from going into a panic attack or a emotional flashback or something that's gonna affect you in a way that's going to set you back a little bit. Okay? And so obviously the number one thing, there's one thing that's universal. It doesn't matter what therapy model, it doesn't matter what it is out there that people use. Diaphragmatic breathing is the one constant no matter what you're doing. If you're doing yoga, if you're doing mindfulness, if you're doing CBT, it doesn't matter what you're doing to calm your nervous system. Diaphragmatic breathing is absolutely universal, okay? And it's because there's science and medical evidence behind it as well as improvement in mental health. Deep breaths into your diaphragm, okay? As deep as you can with your mouth, hold it, and then exhale through your nose. You only have to do this a few times. We're hyperoxygenating the blood. We're giving the brain what it needs. We're also distracting ourselves. Even if it's for 3, 5, 10 seconds, we're distracting ourselves, which automatically has an effect on our body. We automatically see our pulse rate go down, our heart rate go down. It's an immediate reaction to start counteracting the endorphins that are pushing for the stress reaction. Very easy, anybody can do it. So that's the first thing I want you to start trying to do, is taking some deep breaths and just breathing for a second, okay? The second thing that people tend to think is a pain in the butt, but I'm telling you it has unbelievable value, is whether you keep a notepad or a post-it note packet. It doesn't matter what it is, but the distressing thoughts that want to cycle through your brain, just write them down. And the reason why is this gives us the ability to come back to that later when we're ready, instead of this cycle going in your brain. Rumination, okay? So I'm stressing about this certain thing, maybe for me it was, how in the heck do I get this post office form that he needs to get his mail put on his porch, okay? So that's a stressor. So what do? Here you go. I'm going to show you evidence that I do exactly what I'm telling you to do. This is a piece of paper from work, and I started writing things down because I did not have the capacity to sit there and worry about these things right now, because I'm at work and I have to worry about what I'm doing at work, right? And so you're going to get overloaded. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to sit here and ruminate on this and let it stress me out for the rest of the day. I'm going to write it down. So I started writing down the things that I knew I had to do. And then I'm going to come home and I'm going to put it on my desk, and I'm going to divide and conquer, and I'm going to hit these things as I can, okay? I'm not going to try to do it all at once. I'm going to go down that list, okay? And I'm going to do one at a time. And that's how we do these things, okay? We have got to have the ability to know what our abilities are, to know what we're capable of handling right now, okay? It's very, very important, because you're going to escalate and you're going to have a stress reaction. And you know what? I know what that feels like. I know what a panic attack feels like. I know what debilitating anxiety feels like. I know what the depression feels like afterwards. Been there and done that many times. And if there's some things I can show you today, or that we talked about today, that's going to help prevent some of that for you, that's all I want to do today. Okay? So I want you to start with those two things, because I know 100%, 1,000% that they work. You got to breathe. You got to write things down so that you can format and have a structure to what you're going to go after. Okay? The third thing is going to be hard for you. Okay? Especially if you're men. If you're men that are watching this, we are stubborn, we are bullheaded, and we are prideful, and we have ego. And the reason why is not necessarily because we're misogynistic or something. It's because we were taught that way. We were wired that way, especially if you were in an abusive home. You were taught that you had to fend for yourself, okay? The same thing that they teach special forces out on the battlefield. They basically tell them that they have to adapt the mindset that no one is coming, it's up to me. No one is coming, it's up to me. So if we're carrying around that inside us all the way down to our soul, the hardest thing in the world for us, guess what, is to ask for help. Whether it be somebody close to you, whether it be somebody that's a friend, whether it even be just somebody who can give you information. It is so hard for us to ask for help, but you have to do it. It is foolish of me if I work with somebody that's a little bit older than me that has already gone through all of these things with his mother, and I've watched him go through these things, and I've supported him through these things. It's a little bit foolish for me if I don't tap into his knowledge, okay? Number one, it's not offensive or something that's harmful to him. It's actually a way for him to give me his experience, which actually validates his experience. The stuff he went through with his parent that was painful for him now gets some validity because now he's helping somebody else with that information. This is how this works, and we've got to get out of this self-reliant mindset and this egotistical, independent mindset where we think that we're all alone and we have to do it all alone, okay? And I know that it's hard because it's taken me years and years and years, and I still have a hell of a time doing it. But I'm telling you that I believe God puts people in our path. I believe that there's people around us that are there for that reason. And so I didn't interrogate the man, but you know what? I asked him some simple questions. I said, I would really like your advice on something if you're willing. This is what's going on. And he was more than happy. He actually, you could see that he felt validated, that he was happy to give me the information, that it made him feel like what he went through had a purpose now, because he's giving me some advice and giving me some things that I need to do with my father that he had to do with his parent, okay? And so that's just one example of what it looks like to ask for help. But I'm telling you, these three things are 100% tangible, evidential things that you can do to help calm the storm, to help calm the effects of this cumulative stress and trauma all the way from childhood, and to face the things that we're facing today. Because unfortunately, this is life, and this is the life that God crafted us to have, and He absolutely has a reason and a purpose for it. But in the meantime, you need to know how to look after yourself, ground yourself, and to recognize the signs. I truly hope today's video helped someone out there. It's the whole reason of this. As I tell you these things, it's the same thing that I just explained with that man that helped me with some advice for my parent. I am giving you my experiences and an account of what I go through and how I solve these issues, and the truth that is there for me that I know can help you. So that's the whole reason we're here. I thank you so much for listening. Do us a favor, and if this YouTube channel or the podcast is reaching you in a way or speaking to you, please comment on it. And as always, if you could like, subscribe, and share, we're very, very grateful, because that's the only way that this gets out there for people to listen. And I truly believe in my heart that there are individuals out there that need to hear this today that are in similar circumstances. Until next time, God bless, and we look forward to seeing you for the next podcast, Dancing with the Darkness. Thank you.